Hi, I'm Michele Parsons. I've been teaching pyrography to students across the U.S. for over 15 years, and I've taught over thousands of students in a classroom setting. I teach at the International Wood Carving Congress, the Southeastern Wood Carving School, the American Wood Carving School, and many others, and enjoy teaching very, very much. So I'm going to share some of the tips with you today that I have learned in teaching students who are beginners and just starting out.
Ready whenever you are.
So whether you're new to wood burning and trying to figure out which type of burner you want to use, or whether you're trying to figure out you're using a solid point burner and you want to migrate to a wire tip burner, I'm going to tell you some of the differences between the two types of burners. So we're going to start here with the solid point burners. So what I have here on the table is the solid point burners and the wire tip burners. And we'll start with the solid point burners. They're called solid point because they have a brass tip that is solid. And you screw these on and off. You change out the tips this way. And it's the pen handle and the solid point and a cord that you plug into a receptacle. And that's all this unit is. This one here has a rheostat on it. This one is one temperature. The only way to change colors of the burning with this one is to change the speed. This one here has a rheostat, so you can adapt and change the color of the burn with that. Then we have, when you change over to the wire tip, wire tips have a nichrome wire. And these heat up and cool down very quickly. The wire tips over on this side come in either a single pen burner or they come in a dual pen burner. And they all have a transformer or a control box, and they're cabled into the pen. The reason I wanted to show you this one is this is entry level, and the wire to the pen is actually hardwired into the unit, so you can't switch it out. When you move up to the next model, you can actually take the wire off if you should damage it or something, or it should go bad. You can actually unscrew it from the back of the unit and then replace the cord. Now each of these, the pen actually comes off the tip, off the wire. So you can separate them and change out pens. Okay, over here I have a dual burner, which is two pens, and it does not mean that I can use both pens at the same time. It means that I can switch back and forth between the two sides. So with this unit, the reason you would want a dual as opposed to a single is it allows you to change out and have different cords. I can put a standard general burning cord on this side for lower temperatures, and a heavy-duty cord so that you can burn at high temperatures. Or I can do what I'm showing here. I demonstrate with this one a lot. I can put one type of cord on this side that accepts this as a razor tip pen. And I can put on this side a cord that actually accepts another brand like Coalwood. And you notice that the ends of the cords are different because the ends of the pens are different. So it allows me to use any type of pen on this machine. So it's however you want to configure it. You can also have two pens hooked up at the same time and easily switch back and forth between the two. Okay, so the main differences between the solid point and the wire tip, the first one is cost. The solid points are very inexpensive, whereas the wire tips, you can get into some money depending on what level you go up to. The other difference is how long it takes to heat up and cool down a tip. Now this tip right here takes about 5 minutes, I've timed this one, to heat up. And it takes 5 minutes to cool down as well. So brass holds its heat very well once it does fully heat up, and it retains its heat. These, on the other hand, the wire tips, they heat up in seconds. And there are a few tips that actually take longer because they have brass inside of them. Here's a good example. This one right here, inside the ball is brass to keep the heat high. So this one will take longer to heat up, but most of them take just a few seconds to heat up and they're ready to go. They also take a few seconds to cool down. This is very sensitive to air current. So like if you're using a fan to get rid of your fumes so you're not breathing them, and if I put it right here and blow it across my work, what's going to happen is this wire tip is so sensitive that as I go in and out of that air current, it's going to change temperatures on me very dramatically. So you want to take your fan and blow it away from you to get rid of the fumes. And that way it doesn't affect your temperature of your pen, and blow it away. Also, if you're burning outside and you're having a lot of wind, put a shield up so that the wind is not blowing across your work. Sometimes there's different air gusts, like it's almost impossible to do any burning at the beach because it comes from multiple directions. And in that case, you're not going to be able to burn outside because the air will keep changing your pen temperature. The other thing that changes your pen temperature is going to be your surface. Now this wood is very cold, and I want to show you what happens when you burn on a cold piece of wood. So when you're working on a cool surface like this, what's going to happen is the cool wood is going to take the heat right out of this pen. So right now, I've got it adjusted to where it's getting hot because I'm holding it up in the air, but as soon as I put it down on the wood, it's going to turn black, and then as I pull it, it's going to get lighter and lighter. And now look, I have nothing. And the way you get around that is to simply hold it up in the air, and you can either blow on it and put it down here, but I've noticed that by the time you get it back down to the wood, it's going to start heating up again. So if you don't want a black blob and then nothing, what I do is I just take the very tip of it and very lightly, just barely touch it. And that way it starts cooling it down, and then I come down and start burning. The other thing, if you notice, what I'm doing is keeping short strokes, and keep my strokes at about 1/2 inch. And if I want this darker or longer, I can do a second row. If I want to get it darker, I just turn my heat up a little bit and do the whole thing again. Okay, and I can fill in where it gets lighter and then do the second row. If I start seeing that it gets lighter, I can hold it up a second and then continue. See how much darker it got when I held it up? What that's doing is, if I keep my strokes short, it's allowing the pen to recover its heat. If I drag it out too far, it can't recover. So if I put it down and then drag, then I have nothing. So it's not a matter of just monkeying with the dial, it's a matter of your technique and allowing your pen to recover heat. That is totally different than working with the solid point burner. The solid point burner holds its heat better. It does eventually cool down a little bit with the wood, but it's retaining that heat better. When you're working with a wire tip though, you need to just learn the technique of just watching and keeping that heat inside of your pen tip. Now you can do shading with little circles and things like that. If you want to keep it on the wood and do circles, then I would turn my heat up. But when you're doing this type of shading, it models it. It's good for clouds and fluffy things. But if you want flat shading, then I would just do that. So the trick is on the wire tip burner, it's very critical that you, right now I've got it turned off, but I want you to see, you need to keep it perfectly flat. If I lean it to one side or the other, I'm going to get streaks on one side or the other. So it's critical that you keep it flat. Here I'm going to just do a little bit of shading. Now watch what happens if it's important whether you're leaning it to side, but it's also important how high or low you're keeping this pen. If I lean it back too far and I pull it, look what happens. I get a double line. If I tip it up just a little bit more so it's more in a 45-degree angle, then I can get more of a flat shape. Like this. And I also tip it up a little bit higher sometimes, and I write with this tip. Even though it's not a writer, I can make lines with it. So mainly you're wanting to be in this area right here at about a 45-degree angle to get that nice and flat. You can see how much darker it's gotten. It's now heated up fully. And I can get a nice black by just doing my short strokes, If I get too light, I just hold it up for a second and just keep going. And if you see any kind of streaks in there and you want to get rid of them, go the opposite direction when you're done. If you're really wanting to blend it in. So another major difference between the solid point burners and the wire tip burners is the distance from your hand to the tip. Now if you notice here, my hand is pretty far back from the tip, and if I hold this particular point at the right angle so that it's askew and it's on the wood like this, my hand is way up in the air and I can't get my pinky down to support my hand. So what I end up doing is putting my wrist under here as my support. You can also roll up a washcloth and put it under here, or put a sock roll under here, or a block of wood. Block of wood's not very nice for your hand, but something to support your hand, because otherwise it's the same thing as if you took a pen and you were going to write with it and you're holding it up in the air and trying to write your name. That's how much control you've got that you've lost by not supporting your hand. This is a wire tip, and you see now that my hand is very close to the point, down to the tip, and I can rest my hand easily on the surface and use it just like a writing pen or a pencil. And that gives me a lot of control on that. So another big difference between the wire tips and the solid point burners is the variety of pen tips that you have available to purchase. This one right here is the smallest ball made in the world. There's actually a ball on the end of this pen, as opposed to this one's not even the largest one made, but you can see the difference in the sizes of these pens. Also, we have some shaders here. This is a very small miniature shader, and this is a very large shader. So there's quite a variety, and Razor Tip even has over 900 pens and tips that they have available in a variety of ranges. So this is a skew, and in the solid point, here is the skew, and you see how white it is? On the wire tip, it's very, very thin, so look at the size of the line. I can get very detailed lines with this, and I can do feather barbs that are very close together. So because of the detail I can get in this, and it's so thin, what's happening is it's actually going down into the wood and cutting the wood while I'm burning. Whereas on this pen, once it gets on the wood, it's not going to cut down into the wood. One of the things that is different about going from a solid point burner to a wire tip burner is that knowing that you're down inside the wood, you cannot take this pen and go sideways with it. Sometimes when people buy the wire tip burners, they want to write their name with it, and they pick up this nice little sharp tool and they try to write their name with it. Well, this is a skew, and because it's down cutting into the wood, I cannot go sideways with it. Let me show you what happens when you try to. I'm going to stay shallow because I don't want to break my pen. But as I'm drawing this, if I wanted to do an O and I tried to move it over, it's got to skip out of that track. If I'm down too deep in the wood, it's actually going to bend and break this tip. So you want to make sure that if you've got a skew tip, that you either do straight lines with it or you can do curved lines with it, like this. You just twist it in your fingers, but that's why I have the rounded heel skew. On the writer tips, because you can get them so small, they're fine when you're going in the same direction as the wood grain, but watch what happens when I go across the wood grain. If you see this happening where it just kind of does a dotted line, or it's really splotchy or real bumpy, what's happening is if you look at my fingers and pretend that they're wood grain, and each one of these are hardwood grain, if I'm pushing my pen down and I'm pushing up against this hardwood grain, it's going to hesitate, and it's going to hesitate with each time before it releases. So that hard grain is stopping it from moving across this. All I have to do to change that is just lighten up my pressure and go straight across that. Just keep your pressure light and it won't do this. So another difference between the solid point burner and the wire tip burner is the heat. And because these get so hot, this is a one temperature burner, most of the pyrographers that use these have to wear a glove or some kind of protection for their hand because the heat that comes up from this is very extreme. And they don't get that hot. The only time they get hot is when you turn your temperature up to an extreme. But even so, most of the time you don't really feel the heat from these. And I never have to wear a glove when I'm burning with a wire tip burner, other than when I'm burning for long extended many hours at high heat, and then I might wear a glove. Information on wood burning and on coloring and finishes, wood selection, preparation, safety. I have a new book from Fox Chapel Publishing that is called the Quick Start Wood Burning Guide. And inside of it, it's got a lot of pictures and captions. It's very easy to read through, and it covers all the basics that you need to get started. Also, if you're interested in leather pyrography, burning on leather, I have another book that came out last year on leather pyrography. And it's just been translated into German. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the extravaganza. And if you have any further questions, you can email me at the link below in the description.